What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now, Back to the Past. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about my experience playing Oxenfree for the first time in 2023. I'm going to try to break this up into two different sections, a spoiler-free section, which will be this beginning, kind of just gushing over it, talking about surface entry kind of things, right? Just in case there's others out there that is like me that, for some unknown reason didn't play this game when they should have. But then I also do want to talk about spoilers because I think a lot of what makes this game so good is things we have to discuss kind of at length, and it's very hard to do that without spoiling basically the premise of the game. So we're going to try to do both of them in this video. Again, I kind of feel bad because I'm playing this in 2023. This is it's a fantastic game for the first outing of the developer who made it, and then I get to wait less than a year, let's say, until Oxenfree 2 comes out, which is in 2023. The people, the OGs that played it back in 2016, they've had to wait 7 years for Oxenfree 2. We still don't have a date for that, by the way, so hopefully we get it soon. So let's talk a little bit about this game in a spoiler-free fashion. Well, one of the things I always like to talk about is visuals. I'll bring up the audio, because here's the thing. This game, it is great to look at. I love the art style. You obviously spend the entire game looking at it. A lot of when the game starts to descend into madness and things start to, happen, there starts to be kind of like time glitches, which we won't get too into for the spoiler-free section, but when things start to break down, the visuals do a really good job of conveying it. There's a lot of amazing cuts, let's say, throughout this game that are, beautiful, that are really, really well done. But so much of this game is audio, and not just, you have the music, which is just absolutely incredible. The music is very weird. Like I would say the majority of the soundtrack is extremely, extremely odd. And it's kind of more, I wouldn't even call it upbeat. There's a couple scenes in the game we'll probably talk about in the spoiler section where it's supposed to feel more emotional. It's supposed to, harken back to, say, like better times. And the music absolutely reflects that, and I love it. And then when things are just kind of like weird and going on, the music it's kind of terrifying. This game has an amazing atmosphere. And again, I think it does it through visuals when things kind of like pop up randomly. And honestly, there's quite a few jump scares in this game that absolutely got me. But also there's a lot of music cues or just sound cues that tip off when those visual cues also happen. So I think the environment, the atmosphere, what they're going for with this game, they just absolutely nail so well. And it's not even just the music. This game really would be a make or break thing based off its characters, because so much of this game is talking. And now for me, that's right up my alley. Firstly, I can never shut up myself, and neither can these characters, which is a good thing because each of them are so unique, so cool. I love, honestly, all of them individually. Alex, the main character, the one we play as, which is funny that she's got that name, is an incredible character. She has so much personality, and again, as things start to kind of advance and change, these characters, they're reacting to it, they're living in the moment, and they're all just so good, and they're really, to be flat out honest with you, there's not a weak character. I think probably Nona, the character Nona, she gets the least amount, but I would argue that actually plays into like the theme, which again, we can't really get into without spoiling it yet. Her and Ren are actually, with the theme, like they're kind of outskirts. They're kind of people that really had nothing to do with this situation that are there, and you can do stuff with them. They are just different. So the fact that Nona probably is the least realized character actually makes sense. I love Jonas. You spend a lot of the game with Jonas, Ren, Clarissa, Michael. Like, they're all so good. And I think what really makes it special, at least to me, and I've said this before with games even like Firewatch, right, was one of the last videos that I made on this channel. It always impresses me when you can't sell it through their face. In fact, the only really times you see their face is when they'll take pictures throughout the game, right? And then when it's doing its loading, when it's kind of jumping chapters, it'll show you that picture. And there's some ominous, kind of scary stuff going on with those pictures. But beyond that, those are the only times you really can see them, right? A little bit more detail of what they look like. This Alex that you're seeing in my background here, you don't really see that. You're too pulled out for that when you're playing the game, which again is the point, and it's, I think honestly really, really good. So the biggest thing that can make these characters special, there are some things that happen story-wise that make them pretty special that they do show off visually, but so much of it is just their voice, because you're so far back, right? So it's just them speaking to each other. And I really like how they talk to each other. It's a nitpick in a positive way. I'll go into something that I don't really know how many other people care about. They talk very organically. They'll throw in ums in their sentence. They'll repeat the same word. Like, that's not what I'm saying. Like they'll do that, what I just did, right? They'll basically repeat. They'll talk pretty normal. It's not this flawlessly written script where these characters talk perfectly, right? In fact, they'll sometimes say things and you can call them out and say, like, that was a really stupid thing to say. Like, it's just kind of natural how they speak. They're just talking. They're these teenagers and they're just going. They're basically riffing, right? And that's what they're doing with the script even. So I love that. It feels very organic. It feels like they're actually real. Even though, again, the visually and them as characters, it's not the most detailed. You can't tell based off their facial expressions how they're perceiving events. It's all through their voice. And so they do such a good job. Beyond that, I mean, again, we've talked about kind of the atmosphere of the island. I think this game has one of the most clever hooks, maybe of all time. I mean, maybe it's an unfair advantage because it has to do with time, and I'll leave it there for the spoiler-free section. But this game sticking with people, and I had looked, because I was trying to look up all the endings and all the deviation points and all this stuff, and I was looking up, and it's like these people that have played the game, 7 years ago, this is a game that sticks with you. And now I just beat it last night. I finished it last night, and I was playing it a second time as well, which is very recommended because this game kind of gets more and more special the more you play it, and we'll explain why in the spoiler section. But that's just the thing, right? This game sticks with you. This game is special. And, again, for those that have played it 7 years ago or have played it 8 times, like, man, I can't wait for us to get our hands on Oxenfree 2. So, beyond that, keeping it spoiler-free, very hard to talk about anything else. So I think I'm going to leave it there. It's only $10. I gave them my money, right? I want to support them 7 years after the fact. So, if you're interested based off what you've seen or what you've heard, I highly encourage you to play it. But I want to get into the weeds here. So let's jump into the spoiler section and let's talk about some of the big themes, some of the twists and the ending and all that stuff. Okay, so here we go. All right, so this game, in terms of its hook, in terms of what it's actually doing, is so incredibly good. There's so many mysteries kind of going on all at the same time, even though they all link back to, like, one thing. So you have the story of, like, Maggie Adler, right? And her whole past, her whole present, the fact that, and they got me too. I really, for at least the beginning portion of this game, I thought the ghost was her. Because, they mentioned she dies. It's like right there and kind of in front of your face, right? And it's like, okay, so she's probably a ghost trap, but like, what's she up to? But it's like, nah, not really. She dies and all that stuff, but you hear about her background and you hear about how this kind of thing has happened before. And it failed, and I suppose it also succeeded as well, right? Because she technically survived it and she made it out okay, but her friend did not. And, she lived with the guilt of for 50 years or whatever, and what actually happened to get these ghosts to the point that they are and trapping them like basically in another dimension where they were stuck there. And so you can understand what they're trying to do. Like they were murdered accidentally and then they were like sucked into another dimension. So it's like, I get their frustration. I get them being just very mad all the time and wanting to get out. Obviously, like sucking the souls out of people and replacing it with your own is not an ideal way to make amends, but it's the way that they chose to, right? So that whole backstory is incredible. And it's not even necessarily backstory. It's kind of just what organically happens. You have the possessions, which are scary. This game is creepy with the cuts that they make, with the sound effects. This game gets you so many times, whether it be kind of like jump scares, kind of generic jump scares, or they're just legitimately good. And again, they do it through kind of audio clues. They do it through the visuals, kind of like the screen basically breaking or tearing. Jumping back in time, the Michael scenes is what I was, mentioning earlier with the kind of feeling good, right? But the way they do it, where you're in the present and you're asked about something and you're like, that makes no sense, and then it just transports you back. And it actually makes me kind of sad, right? Because I was playing it a second time, and the second time of this game is so freaking good, right? Because she remembers, and the ghosts remember, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I almost want to wipe my own memory to go back to the first time of playing it, because some of the most like creepy moments when they're talking to you and just the way they talk. I mentioned, audio cues, the way the ghosts communicate through the radio. I mean, it's very like Transformers-wise with like a bumblebee, but just, I mean, it's like that, but as if it was demonic, right? Or if you just made it kind of evil. It's so creepy, but it's so well done because it kind of comes across like they're reaching out for help, right? Like they're not necessarily there to do anything, especially the first couple times you talk to them, right? When they're only talking through the radio and very cryptic kind of messages that you don't really know the meaning of. But then obviously they start to get stronger as I guess you start to get weaker and they start to be able to talk more. I will say I think they sacrificed some of the scariness, some of the more creepy elements of the beginning, because I mean, it's just maybe a me thing. When they're talking kind of like piecemeal in their radio form, right? When they're using different broadcasts of different people to say a sentence, I'm a sucker for that stuff. Again, it's kind of like the Bumblebee thing. I love that. As the game goes on, they talk just fully. They just talk very fully, and they talk mainly through, let's say, Clarissa, right? That's mainly their vessel that they're talking through. And they speak full-on sentences. Now, there can also be creepy moments like when you're in Maggie Adler's house in the attic, and Clarissa says, like, Alex, come down. And it's like, it actually gives you chills. At least it gave me chills where it's like, oh my God. Because you know what's going to happen. I think at some point the game does get a little predictable where you know when these time loops are going to occur. But it actually makes you feel like mad or scared depending on what they're trying to do. And I think that's incredible and beautiful, right? Because it's like, I'm frustrated as a player of Alex because I just want to see her survive and be okay. And we're in the stupid time loop. And it's not stupid. It's incredibly cool. But it's like, oh, man, like we can't move until they tell us what they need to tell us. And so it's a little bit of frustration in a good way. Or then the Clarissa thing, like I said, with the attic, that is just so creepy. So they sacrifice a little bit. They gain actually a little something back as well. I'm just not the biggest fan of them talking just complete sentences through people, but at the end of the day, that's their goal. Their goal is to possess everybody and get out. So eventually they would have to talk. I mean, they don't talk normally. They kind of talk pretty scary, but they talk like a normal person, which does make a lot of sense. So you have all that going on, right? And then you have the idea of time with Alex, the multiple versions of Alex. So I really want to talk about this just because this is really one of the most creative, cool things I think I've ever seen in a game. Now, it's still with time. I think I'm just a guy that actually really like Life is Strange 1 with Max, right? Is one of my favorite games of all time. And it's because actually of several reasons, but I don't think the time powers, hurt it in any way. But what they're doing in this game makes perfect sense for the game. You have all these mysteries, and then you have maybe the biggest mystery of all, which is Alex herself. And the kind of terrifying reality that, like, you're basically screwed because you're not even playing as the first or necessarily the last version of yourself. And once you realize that, a part of your soul, I do believe, kind of dies. No, I beat the game, right? So I beat it. And I got what I would kind of consider the good ending, but it wasn't the true ending. It wasn't them at like that store, the kind of like mini store talking. That is the best ending, right? And that's where you finally get your message through. But here's the thing. You still feel sad. You still feel like you lost because you did save that one. And whether or not, because there's kind of debate in the community, whether or not you want to believe that's the final version of Alex, that's fine. And if you don't want to believe that, well, then obviously there's going to be other versions of Alex that still get stuck there. But even if you believe that's the final form of Alex that's told by herself to stay away from the island and they don't go, you still have the Alex that was trapped there forever to tell her that, right? And once you kind of realize that, that's when your soul dies. Because it's like, well, we saved one, and maybe you save more, right? If it's a multiverse, say and I believe they do say there's an infinite amount. There's an infinite amount of Alexes. A little BioShock Infinite-like as well, which I also really like that game, so again, it could be a theme. So you still have that Alex losing, because there still has to be an Alex that's trapped on the island that's trying to relay a message back in time or whatever to get to yourself, and so you still lose. But how the game goes about that is literally incredible. The mirror, right, where you're talking to yourself, and then at the end of the game, you realize that was you, a different form of you, and you get to make those calls, which will then influence the next playthrough. It's It's nuts how deep the game actually, just even that itself. And then when you replay it and you realize, oh, the game knows, this is one of the greatest New Game Plus plural, that I've ever seen in my life. Truly. Now, I don't actually play that many games, again, in a New Game Plus, but, a lot of games, you keep the upgrades, you keep your weapons, and you just, you replay it. This game is almost a new game. Now, there's a lot that's the same, right? Maybe like 60%, but those 40% other things, when you replay it a second time, it's actually incredible, because I don't think you get the full experience at all. You really don't. You have to at least, I would say, play this game once and then play like the opening 20 minutes or so, the second time, just to get a taste. And I think actually you're going to keep wanting to play it after that. But you need to do, I think, that just at the bare minimum to understand, and even just the heartbreaking of when Alex is narrating where everybody goes, and then she narrates what you get to pick, what she does, and then there's the cut. And it's like, God damn it, because you feel like you won. And I didn't know how the game was going to end, right? I knew a little bit about this game before I jumped in. I knew time, but I didn't know how it worked. And I knew like it was like a ghost, like supernatural thing. That was about it, right? But I didn't know how it was going to end. So when she's narrating, I did kind of pick up on the idea that like, this isn't the first time, or there's maybe going to be more of you, all that kind of stuff. And then when she's narrating what she's going to go on to do, and then there's that cut. There's a time little interrupt, which they do throughout the whole game. So when it happens, you know what's about to happen, right? And they do it. And you're like, and like literally you just lose part of your soul, because it's like, oh no. And then she starts to repeat. And she starts to say, oh, I'm going to go on the island tonight, going to meet this new guy. And it's like, oh my God, no, you're trapped. It's so amazingly well done. And then you play it. Then you go in a second time, and she'll sometimes remember certain things are going to happen. Not all the time, but she'll remember some of it. The game will skip sections of the game, and you'll literally be able to comment on it. You'll say, wait a second, did we just miss a huge part of this game? I love that, by the way. That's actually incredibly cool. And then you'll even have the supernatural side of things. That's really, I think, where the game, the second time, deviates the most, right? Because they add so much new stuff to what they say. That's when they start talking about infinite Alexes, and you've already done this before, like, why are you trying again? You're going to break eventually. We're going to get you eventually. You hear those kind of things on your second playthrough, and it's basically a new experience. It's so good. And then again, you can figure it out. I looked up a bunch of the, how things will go differently, saving Michael versus not saving Michael. The first time I didn't save him, I thought that would kind of be the right thing to do. I think, I'm not 100% sure, I think the perfect ending, you may have to save him, but then Jonas doesn't exist, so I don't actually know if that's true. What I do find interesting is in that perfect, the true ending, when you're all talking, it does cut off right before you say what Jonas is to you, right? It's a similar line delivery as it is when you're on the ferry, right? Like, what is he to you? And, your stepbrother, whatever. But then when you're talking and you get out of going to the island because you hear yourself, as you walk away, the last thing Ren asks is like, well, what is Jonas to you? He could just be your friend. Just because, everything was reversed with Michael, does that mean Jonas doesn't exist? Not really. It just means Jonas wouldn't be your stepbrother. If Michael lives, their parents, I guess, Alex and Michael's parents don't get divorced, and then Jonas never becomes a stepbrother. But that doesn't mean he doesn't exist, and that doesn't mean he can't naturally come into your life at some point as just a friend. So I love just that very clever cutoff. They just cut it off there where you really don't know. But this game is so special, as you can tell from spoilers or non-spoilers. It's so special because it sticks with you. Like, I could keep going. And I have a feeling I'm going to keep thinking about this game as time goes on. Again, maybe I'm a sucker for like these time loop kind of things, but just the way it gets you thinking about, there's the mystery of why they're there, of what actually happened, right? Because you kind of have to piece that together or read it online, right? Like, you first have to figure out what in God's name actually happened, with the historical points as well, where you can tune in with your radio, right? You have all of that. And you get a little bit, or you get all of it if you do all of it. If you don't, you kind of have to look it up and read into it, which I actually had to do because I didn't find everything. So you have that whole part. You have the part that it's just a good game. It's got its moments where it's just incredibly powerful, whether it's emotional or shock value when Clarissa kind of, falls off the building. It's like, what? And I literally said that. I was like, there's no way you just killed her right there, right? And then she's gone. And it's like, this game is messing with my emotions. And they just do that throughout the whole game. But then you also have the time idea and the time theme with this game. It's multi-layered in ways that a lot of games aren't. Its New Game Plus is basically a new game on its own. And I think it's so different, you have to play it. Otherwise, telling me, well, I played Oxenfree, I played it one time. Does that really mean you play? You know what I mean? I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to say, you have to play the game 17 times so you're not a true fan. None of that BS. But it's actually so insane that I think you could make an argument where it's like, well, how many times did you play it? Once. Wow, you didn't get the full experience. And it's like, well, for most games, that would suffice. You would be fine playing it one time through. Most games I only play one time through. But for this game, to get everything, even if you do it perfectly naturally without looking it up somehow on the first playthrough, you still should probably play it more than once just to kind of see everything. So it's so incredibly good. So let me know what you guys think. I will be right here for Oxenfree 2. Well, probably on the main channel, but it'll be in the Podcast Now network kind of family. But let me know what you think. Make sure you guys are subscribed, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.